Welcome to the Fatherhood Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Pluff. Each week, we will cover various topics that dads struggle with in their fitness journey. I'll give you actionable steps that you can apply right away, not only to take back control of your own health, but so you're able to be a better example for your kids too. All right, welcome in today. We have a really fun episode. We've got Tim Griffin in. Tim is a fellow online fitness coach, and he's going to be talking to us about a variety of things today. But I'm going to let him introduce himself here.
Hey, Anthony. How's it going, man? Thanks a lot for this. Appreciate that. So a little bit about me. I primarily work with folks over 50 years old. Not exclusively, but that just tends to be my focus, given that that's my age bracket. So I'm super keen on, all things kind of related to health and fitness, and from a holistic perspective, really for older folks. So I just use the term older adults, but I've worked with everybody of all ages. I've even got clients now in their 20s. So open to working with anybody, but specifically focused on kind of like, aging optimally, if you will. And that encompasses everything. So it's not just about your body, it's about your mind, it's about your spirit, it's about your relations, all that stuff. But the place that I always start typically is the physical part, because as Westerners, I think that's like the best gateway. It's like the best access point for us, right? It's a place that we can all kind of relate to. We're inundated with visuals about bodies all the time. So it's a place for us to start. And what I find is whether it's, strength training or mobility training or yoga, whatever it is, once you start and you start to feel good and you start to become aware of the benefits of taking care of yourself, then your how should we put it? Like your lens gets widened, and you start to realize, I could work on my relationships, I could work on my mindset. So all that stuff, that's kind of my focus.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's really cool. You said that kind of the working on kind of the physical there is kind of the gateway to working on some other areas there. And you mentioned kind of in the Western world here that we may do things a little bit differently. So have you always kind of had that perspective on things, or as you have gotten older, as you've worked with a more variety of people, has that changed? And how have you seen that when people start taking care of one area of their life, the other ones start to kind of follow as well?
Yeah, it's great. That's a lot of layers to that question there. So I kind of started out in yoga, honestly. I mean, that was sort of the first practice, call it, that got me to start really paying attention, which is really the important point. Like, at what point do you become really aware of how you feel in your body? And you become aware of, like, my God, I need to do something about this because I just feel like crap. So what do I do? And I was, this was at a point, and you can relate to this, I'm sure, when my kids were a lot younger and I didn't have a lot of time, right? So I needed to find something that was very efficient. I needed to cover all the bases in one thing. I needed something that was going to work me physically, mentally, spiritually, open my heart, all that stuff. And it had to be one thing. I couldn't carve it out and go, all right, I'm going to do my workout 3 days a week. Then I'm going to go do my mind thing. Then I'm going to go do my, I couldn't do that. I wanted one thing. So I went into this really challenging hot yoga class, and it just kicked my ass. And I realized at that point, okay, there's something to this. So that's when I started doing that. I was about 40 years old at that point. And then from there, I got into teaching, and that was going along with that. But, there became a point where I realized that I needed some strength training too, because I needed to focus on this. Sarcopenia was real, muscle mass loss was happening. And the yoga practice itself, while you can get really strong, wasn't maintaining muscle mass the way I wanted to, and it wasn't making me feel as good as I wanted to feel. So that's when I became a personal trainer and got into the more Western side of things. So I always view myself as looking at the two worlds side by side, a more Eastern kind of focus and a more Western kind of focus. And there's so much overlap. Like, if you look on Instagram, and you see all these new, like the latest mobility move by so and so. It's like, yeah, that's, humans have been doing that for thousands of years, man. That's not new necessarily. It's just like something new in your realm, which is cool. And there's crossover in both directions, both ways. You go to a yoga class now, you see people working in mobility moves that are not the yoga posture, but obviously really good for that joint. So it's great. And I like to be in that space between the two. And then, I think this too. If you're doing any kind of physical movement, whether it's a yoga practice or strength training, you become much more present. You become much more like you actually like yourself more, right? And so you can start to get some awareness about the mental health that you might be gaining from your practice, or you might need to work on. It's better for your relationships. And so there's bleed over into all these realms, all these pillars, whatever you want to call them, for your life. So I really value the connection of all those things. And I don't want to focus on just one.
Yeah, I think that's, just realizing that they are all intertwined and they can complement everything that you're doing. I think that's hard because I think most people probably would start off in strength training before they did yoga, before they did meditation and things like this. I know that's exactly how I was. The first time I was ever kind of introduced to weight training was like sport specific weight training. So then, you do things, whatever your coach or your teacher tells you to do in school or something like that. And then it's not until you're older where you can start focusing on these things. Well, then all of a sudden you're at some point where your body starts to hurt. You didn't necessarily maybe do this right. So then that's when people look back into more flexibility and then the yoga, and then they go into meditation and things like that. And it's really hard. It's almost like you're working backwards there at some point, because we're all born with, a certain level of mobility, a certain level of flexibility, and we lose that because we focus so much on strength training. And we may warm up, we may stretch, but 2 30-second stretches after you strength train isn't really going to do much if that's the only kind of functional movement you're doing. And I noticed that myself. Yeah. I had never really done yoga or anything like that before, but I kind of dabbled around with some meditation for a while, did it for a little bit. Didn't quite. I was kind of chronically stressed, and it just took me a while to kind of calm down. So I kind of stopped that for a while. But when I came back to it, when I started incorporating the yoga, I realized that the breath work really helped with my mobility. It really helped with my flexibility because I was breathing through these. And then I realized it carried over into my strength training too, which then carried over into everyday life. And now all of a sudden, some of these things that just cause pain, just, walking around the house, all of a sudden, like, I'm more conscious of my breath. I'm more conscious of how I'm feeling. I start focusing on sleep and hydrate and all these things. And they really do. They kind of intertwine there. And I know you said you kind of work with a variety of clients. Have you noticed maybe a shift, or maybe it needs to shift that way, but have you noticed a difference in the past, like 10 or 20 years, on how people are approaching things, or maybe how you're trying to approach it different, and so people aren't starting so far behind?
Yeah. So the fact that you mentioned breath work is great, because I left that out, and that's really key, right? And people do come to me from all different kind of perspectives. Like they might come from a strength training, athletic sort of background, or they might come from strictly all they've ever done is meditation. They don't know anything about, they don't even know what a real good squat looks like, or nothing like that, right? So people can come from kind of all walks of life. And I like to bring them into the middle, kind of, right? So for the last 10 or 20 years, I don't know, they're coming from kind of all directions. And I do think that things are getting more, as time goes by, getting more and more holistic, right? You hear a lot about breath work now in sort of the fitness domain. And that's really new, like in the last 5 years, and that's been a practice in the East forever. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of cool that we can translate these things into a way that people will be able to digest them. Because it's not that you would never have understood what breath work was like. It's just that somebody didn't explain it to you in a way that made sense and didn't give you sort of like, linguistic or cultural roadblocks that just made you go, what? I don't get that. So it's just a matter of translating it and communicating it in a way that people can understand. And I've been doing that with even just strength training clients, like working on the breath with every rep pretty much, like, and making it make sense to them without talking about anything else. The theory doesn't really matter. It's just like, just breathe like this, right? If they have an interest in the theory behind it and where it comes from, then that's cool. But that isn't necessarily required for them to benefit from that. I think I got off your question there. What was your question?
No, that's all right. No, I think you were kind of talking there too about how you're kind of applying that to some of the strength training, and I think
Yeah.
I don't know if you have experience with like martial arts or boxing or anything like that, but that's a huge focus there with the breath. If you have to control your breath there, and I have noticed with some of the clients I work with, those who have a more diverse background tend to kind of pick up some of the things in the weight room a little quicker too, because they understand, that their power comes from their breath. When you're throwing a punch, you got to breathe through it there. And those who kind of have more of that diverse background there, and not necessarily they have to do it from, they have to compete in it, but just to have taken a class or something, especially even at a young age. I feel like the younger you can kind of do that things, you can apply it to everything that you're doing. And I've noticed that they seem to be able to pick up things quicker, and it's not as a drastic focus. Because if you've gone your whole life until 50 and you've never weightlifted, you've never participated in a lot of activities, it's not saying it's impossible to get to where you want to be, but it's more, I feel like there's a bigger learning curve there.
Yeah, and that works both ways, right? So I think it's kind of a gross generalization, but it's true. It's like, if you have somebody that has some experience with some kind of Eastern practice, whether it's yoga or whether it's martial arts, what I think they bring to strength training is just much more awareness, and they understand the value of being aware, right? Whereas if you have somebody who's just been in the gym, not always, but they can often just be like checked out half the time, like they're not paying attention. It's like they're doing the reps, but they're not actually present when they're doing it, right? The benefit the other way around, I think, is for a lot of folks who have done Eastern practices first, they're intimidated almost by like pushing themselves hard, right? So I think the great sort of benefit from that is like they will learn with their awareness that they can actually push themselves a lot harder than they thought they could. And they can actually get a lot stronger than they thought they could. And that's another way that they sort of like can crisscross, and one benefits the other. But I think the awareness thing is the benefit that comes from the Eastern practice, and then the Western practice. And it's not like, suck it up and bang out the reps. It's just like, you are a lot stronger than you actually realize. Don't be afraid to sweat a little, because it's going to benefit you.
Right. That's funny that you say that, because my experience with clients is I have a lot of them who, if they're not sore, if they're not hurting during their workouts, they feel like they're not doing it. I have clients who tell me all the time, like, the workouts are going great. When I got done, I did 4 or 5 more exercises afterwards. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. And then we kind of have to go back to, there's a reason why we're doing it this way and stuff, because in a couple of weeks from now, like, your body's not recovering, it's affecting your sleep, it's affecting all these things. And so I think if you can apply the two, there's people who need to push themselves a little harder, and there's other people who need to dial it back a little bit. I know rest times is something I preach on. When we're trying to build strength, we need to rest a little longer between sets. And I was like, that's why I use I don't know what app you use for your clients, or if you use one, but I use the Trainerize app, and it has a timer built in there. And so I'm like, utilize this time, like the rest times. So that's the first thing I always tell them when we're going through their new phase of their workouts. Like, the rest times were not a mistake. Like, they're on there. They're on there, because then they get done. They're like, yeah, I got my workout done in half the time it said I was going to. And I'm like, Well, that's probably not a that's probably not always a good thing. Yeah, have you kind of noticed some of that stuff with your clients
Oh,
too?
totally. Sure, for sure. Yeah, I have a couple clients in particular who not just about being sore, but it's like if I'm not like drenched in sweat at the end of this, then I haven't worked out.
Hmm.
And so the rest, the whole idea of rest, and from the smallest, rest interval during sets to like getting the right kind of sleep to other forms of rest, like meditation is actually a form of recovery for your mind and body.
Yeah.
So those are really important. Yeah. And and if you've got somebody, I have a few older clients who just want to crush themselves, in every workout. And it's like, nah, you don't really want to do that. I mean, look back over the last few months, you continue to get strong, but you don't want to hurt yourself. You don't want to overuse things, especially, if you're over 60, you know, so be smart about that. Yeah, rest is super important.
Yeah, yeah. Now, how would so you obviously have more experience in this area than I do. If someone was, they maybe they work 40, 60 plus hours a week. They're chronically stressed. They are strength training, but they're not necessarily kind of getting the benefits that they want to out of it. How would you maybe kind of tailor like a recovery plan? Would you integrate some yoga into what they're doing? Maybe take a strength training day away? Would you
Mm.
have them maybe try and do meditation? What kind of stuff would you do for a client like that?
Usually the first thing is a conversation about priorities, because if you're working 40, 60 or more hours a week, clearly that's your priority. And like, is it possible with a client to just address that first? Like, can they even entertain the idea that maybe they're working too much? Maybe they're not taking care of themselves as well as they can. So that's kind of the first question. And then, to break it down, it would depend on what they're open to. I do have some clients where, after a while, we swap out one strength session a week for what I call a mobility session, which ends up being, again, whatever they're open to. And I'll translate it into something that they're okay with, they can understand. And so that could be anything from, a mobility strength session to a body weight functional session, or it might even be just super chill yoga stretching with some meditation at the end. It kind of depends on what they're open to. But I haven't had anybody, that I've worked with in that way, not see the benefits of doing that, you know. And for somebody who's working that many hours, it's going to be hard for them to find time to add something more. It's like, wait, I'm doing 3 sessions a week with you, and now you want me to do something else. It's like, I don't have time for that. So trying to figure out what the best way to do that is, work it in, and whatever they're open to. 5 minutes, sit and breathe for 5 minutes, you know.
Yeah.
It kind of depends on what they're open to. But yeah, I will definitely try and do that, because I want them to have a more holistic approach. It's not just like, you work 60 hours a week. Okay, let's bang out 3 really hard sessions this week, and then if you sleep, cool. Yeah, it doesn't work.
Right, right. Yeah, I do have. I mean, I work primarily with dads, and so dads come from all ages, right? And I get a lot. I get a lot of dads who I work with who have really young kids. I have young kids. I've got, but my daughter is almost 1.5 now, and so she's not quite at that newborn stage anymore. She's sleeping a little bit more regularly. But I have a couple clients who their kids are under 6 months, and so it's difficult for
Yeah.
them to kind of find that routine, because they were pretty active before. They're working out 3 days a week, they're going to the gym, they're getting good
Yeah.
sleep, and then their whole world is just kind of shifted around. And then they're talking to me and they're like, well, I haven't been able to get a workout in like 3 months. I tried to go down there, but I was so tired and stuff like this.
Yeah.
And I usually just tell them, I was like, this phase doesn't last forever. When you're in it, it feels like I'm never going to make it work, but it doesn't last forever. They're going to sleep better again. But for 3 months
Yeah.
right now, if you could just focus on, like hitting a step goal, that's one of the things I was trying do with my clients is just hitting a step goal. If you could just
Yep.
work on hitting a step goal each day, it doesn't have to be, if you were at 10,000, you may not be at 10,000 steps a day. You may have to drop that down to 7. I don't know. You may have to drop it down to
Yep.
5 for a period of time. But if you can do that and you can focus on getting sleep when you can and you're eating and things like that,
Yep.
when they start sleeping a little better, you can start incorporate these things into it. And I find this is a good time to kind of mess around with some things maybe you haven't tried before. There, you could try some yoga. You can try, this is a great time to bust out the foam roller. The kids are laying on the ground, like you're playing
Yeah.
with them.
Yeah.
Get the foam roller out. What would you kind of recommend? Kind of the same situation, but it's almost on the opposite spectrum there, where they're still working, they're still they're still trying to do their normal routine, but now you're caring for a life, another life that you've never experienced this before. So
Yeah.
would you even try and do some of the strength training things, or would you say we're going to kind of halt on that?
No, I think you kind of nailed it. Actually, it's more a mindset thing first, because like if you have younger kids, especially that young, it's like, man, you just gotta put your head down and take the next step. It's like your routine is completely whacked, and that your priority is this other life. So you're just going to do what you have to do. And like you said, back it off as much as possible and stay consistent with something, and it's not even like, I don't even know if I'd focus on getting stronger. It'd just be like, find some time to take care of yourself, like whatever that is. If that just means you get an extra hour of sleep, if that, like playing mobility games on the floor with your kids is perfect. There's plenty of ways you can play silly games on the floor with your kids and work in different stretches and roll around and stuff. That's a great idea. But for me, it's more about mindset. It's more about mindset coaching, and like, all right, be nice to yourself. Like, yes, you're not getting in whatever workouts you were doing before. Yes, you're getting softer. Like, this happens, but like you said, it's only a phase, and you'll be able to tweak it as you go. The responsibility and the priority is always going to be there, but there's light at the end of the tunnel. You just got to get through this early phase when these little ones are just completely like dependent on you for every single thing, right? It's just going to take a little while. But I think the mobility games are great. And I don't know if they're open to a meditation practice, it's a good time to start really small, super small, 5-10 minutes, breathe, do something really simple with your breath, to give you a little bit of equanimity before you have to deal with all the fires you're going to put out for the day. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
No, I think that's great. And I think kind of like you said, it's just a phase. That's what life is, though. We're just in a constant phase changes all the time. And one of the things I always kind of stress with my clients is I ask them, like, when we first create their program, we look at it and I say, do you feel like you could stick to this for 12 weeks? And they say, yeah, I can do that. And then I ask them, do you think you can stick with this for the rest of your life? And if they say, no, probably not, I got this. And then I said, okay, well, then we need to go back to figure out what we're doing here. Because when we look at things with now, obviously there are times where I will kind of ramp up. I may add an extra workout in, but I know I'm only going to do that for 2 months, for 3 months, something like that. And so workout phases are different than phases in life. And so like, I try and always kind of stress with them, like, if you can work out 2 days a week consistently for the next year, that's what we're going to do. I would rather you do that than do 3 workouts this week, 1 workout next week, 2 workouts because you're not building momentum there. You're not solidifying this habit. If you're working out this Tuesday, then you don't work out till Tuesday of August, and then, so I try and create some kind of consistency there. And, I've had a couple clients try and do some yoga, and I've had them try and do meditation and things, and they get really overwhelmed. It starts off good. I feel like the first month when I work with somebody, it's hard to get feedback because everybody's excited. You're excited to make changes. You're excited to do this. And if I asked them to work out every single day, they probably could because they're excited. It's new, but then life happens. And if they're trying to do too many things at once, then they get overwhelmed and burnt out. So you're trying to incorporate some strength training, some mobility, some yoga, mindset, things like that. How do
Mhm.
you kind of incorporate that with your clients without kind of overwhelming them with so many new things at once?
Yeah. So it's the whole thing, like, don't keep giving them stuff to do. It's like you're there to help them, not to make things much harder for them, right? So what I would say is, if somebody's super busy, is just to dial back the time requirement and let them, it's almost like unburden them of thinking in their head that they've got, like, I got to set aside 40 minutes or an hour for this. Like, where the hell am I going to find that time? That's just not going to happen. So I start talking to them about shorter sessions. I start talking to them about incorporating even almost like micro workouts, like break up what you know you're going to do that day. Let's say you're going to do 5 exercises that day. Like, break them up throughout the day. Like, you're doing your squats while you're doing the laundry. I mean, whatever it is, because even if you just did that, even with less weight than you usually, are pressing, your body's just going to feel better. So it's like, spread it out during your day, make shorter sessions. Like, don't beat yourself up because you can't set aside an hour for this. I mean, I really try to figure out a way that it can fit into their specific life requirements. Whether if they're in an office or if they're at home, there's a transition between home and office. Sometimes you can get stuff in there. It's just helping them look through their life and try to find a way that's manageable, and not to give them more stuff to do in an already hectic, life.
Right. And you said kind of fit it into your life and stuff. And I think a lot of times too, we don't realize that we all have different lives. Like, your life is different than mine. My life is different than my clients. My
Yeah.
best friend may be going to the gym 4 or 5 times a week, but my best friend doesn't have kids. My best friend's
There
not
you
married,
go.
right? And so
There you go. There you go.
you just have
Yeah.
different phases, and you know, two workouts a week may not seem like much to me because I'm used to doing 3 workouts a week plus some mobility work and things in there. But 2
Mhm.
workouts a week to my parents, or 2 workouts a week to my sister or somebody who's not working out regular, like
Yeah.
that could be, that's a huge win there. And so I think
Yep.
just looking at other people, like what they're doing, like and it's hard, like it's
Yep.
hard. Like, I know this stuff, but I do the same thing. I follow people on Instagram and Facebook, and oh, they're doing this. Like, oh shoot, they worked out today, and like, it's like
Yeah.
it's 4th of July, right? Like, it's all this stuff, and
Yeah.
I think it is hard too, and a lot of times though, I think we put too much pressure on ourselves. We put too much pressure on to change right away, and
Yep.
like I said earlier, like, if we look at it like there's an end date, we're always going to be disappointed, because if we work really hard for the next 12 weeks, you can make great results, but it's
Mhm.
what you do after that. It's what you do.
Yeah.
If you work out for 12 weeks and stop, you might as well have not worked out for those 12 weeks, because
Yeah.
you're probably going to be much harder on yourself. You may end up in a worse situation. And so if you can
Yep.
only work out once or twice a week, that's awesome. Stick with that. And when life slows down,
Yep.
incorporate some more things. And I mean, I think you would agree with this, is that sometimes we need to do less. We need to do less in order to get kind of more results there, right? And like,
Mhm.
you're incorporating all these things, which I have found a ton of benefits out of doing more mobility work. I do mobility work almost every other day. I do a little bit on the days I'm working out, and then my
Yep.
rest days, my off days, I try and get into a deep squat, do something, because at first it was hard because I wasn't used to it and I couldn't get very low in my squat because I was so tight, but I feel so much better. And so, like, I look
Mhm.
forward to doing this, but
Yep.
I found that sometimes you have to kind of take away some of those things. If you're working on mobility, you're working on meditation, maybe just pick one right now. Pick
Mhm.
one, make that a
Mhm.
habit. Even if you're only doing 1 day of meditation a week or 1 day of yoga or mobility work a week, if you start at 0, you're still getting benefits. It might not be as quick. I always kind of look at it as like learning a language. If
Yep.
you're practicing it 1 day a week, it's your practice isn't for naught. Like you're still getting
Yeah.
benefits out of it. It's just going to take a little bit longer, and that's okay. Sometimes that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to go back to where you started with the whole context thing, I mean, context is so important. Like you can't, and everybody can be reminded of this all the time, myself included. Like I can't continue to compare myself to somebody on Instagram. I don't know the context of their life. Like, I have 3 kids. Maybe he doesn't have kids. Maybe he doesn't have a relationship. Maybe he has a personal chef and doesn't do his own laundry. I don't know that. I don't know what his life is like, right? So it's like to compare yourself to others is just it's almost like failure. You're just kind of baking failure into your whole mindset, right? So it's figure out what you can do in your life and get the support of a coach, right? Got to have the support of a coach. I have my own coach for all that stuff. And you got to do that. And like you said, start off with something that will work. So if you dial back to 20 minutes 3 times a week, cool. If you dial back to just doing mobility work with your kids on the floor, cool. If you're cooking and you remember like, oh, I could do a little squat mobility right now in front of the stove, just do that you're going to feel better just from doing it for a couple minutes. Something is better than nothing. And like you said, more consistently than not, right? If you do something once a week, you're going to have it in your brain body, or your mind body is going to remember that. So the next time you come back to it, it'll be a little easier. You're not going to progress crazy fast, right? But you will have it in there, the fact that you did it. So I think you're right about that.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think, just like you said there, like you're cooking, kind of getting into a deep squat, things like that. And getting into a deep squat, at first, you're probably going to have to do it assisted, holding on to something. I still hold on to something most of the time because my hips get tight, things like that. And I can just kind of get down in there, but there's something I can do anywhere. I don't have to have special equipment. And that kind of plays out into everything I'm doing, my strength training, my mobility work, even some of the meditation, because if I'm sitting on the floor doing stuff like that, and my hips are real tight, it's uncomfortable, then I can't focus on things. So just having good mobility, working on those mobility, and I think that's something that is pretty cool, because I think people are becoming more aware of it. There's mobility coaches now, and and I feel like that's a relatively new thing. And I like you said, hiring a coach. I've hired multiple coaches before, because I only know what I know, right? And I think it's important. I think it's important to get other people's perspectives. And even if you just learn one little thing from the coach you're working with, it can completely change other areas as well. And it was completely worth it right there, just paying for someone to get some of that information. And now I like I said, I have a lot of clients, kind of a wide variety of ages there, but I have a lot of dads too, who a lot of clients who are dads who their kids are getting older. They're moving out of the house. And so now they have more time. They have a little bit more time to start taking care of themselves. And a lot of them had been in shape in the past. But it's been, they kind of put themselves further down the list there. Their kids' health, maybe their wife was working out more often, but once they've gotten home from work, the last thing they want to do is start working out. They want to sit on the couch. They want to, catch up on all the Marvel movies or something. And what would you kind of recommend for someone who maybe they've never been in shape, or maybe it's been 15, 20 years since they've kind of been where they want to? How would you recommend they kind of start kind of taking back control of their health?
So if they're just really deconditioned and they haven't done anything consistently for, over a decade or whatever, I mean, it would depend on how old they are, honestly. Like, are they 40? Are they 50? Are they 60? Like, how old are they? Because, bodies change and expectations need to adjust accordingly. Now, it's not to say that you can't do almost anything, because you can. If you take care of yourself, you can learn, you can get stronger, all of those things. But at that point, if you've had such a sedentary lifestyle, you may have some injuries that are going to complicate the situation. So it's a very individualistic thing. I would just say, like from a mindset perspective, just know that it's never too late. Like it's never too late to get strong. It's never too late to learn more about your body. We were designed for movement. It's like at any age, pretty much, unless you really have some injuries that are going to prevent that, right? If you're in reasonably good health, it really depends on what you want to do. Like it's all possible. It's all open to you. If you're 40 or 50 years old, and you don't have any major injuries, there's no reason why you can't get to be super fit. Like that's absolutely possible. It's just a matter, I would say, get a coach, because you're going to need some guidance, and get started, and and be realistic. The thing is, keep busy. Like I think one of the, I don't know which study this was in, but there's strong indicators out there that say we need to be busy. So like this idea of that you get to a certain age, like 55 or 65, and you retire and you become a couch potato because you've earned it. Like you've done that for your life. And that's the death sentence. That's like, you're just going to sit down and wait to die. That's ridiculous. It's like, keep moving, like do something. Like you don't have to go to work, at a thing that you hate. But like, I don't know whether that means volunteering, take up a new sport, get creative, like keep your mind and your body moving, because that's what you were designed to do.
Right. Yeah. That's funny. Yeah. I actually had that conversation with my wife the other day about, I obviously it'd be nice someday to retire and travel around, go see grandkids and things like that. But I told her, I was like, I gotta have something I'm doing. I'm gonna, like, it's nice.
Yeah.
It feels great going on vacation, take a couple of days off from work. But by the time I get back, I'm like, I got to do something. I can't just sit around here all the day. And that's why that's why I always kind of preach with my clients, just set a step goal. Because even if you do nothing else that day, you've got, an hour of walking in, or, 30 minutes of walk, wherever your limit is right now. Because like yesterday morning, I went for a walk before the family was up. It just feels good, because I know some days are busy and I may not be able to get some other things in. So if I get it done early in the morning, like I feel I have that sense of accomplishment, but my body feels better. And I've noticed too, like even if I don't have time for mobility work or things like that, going for a walk is the simplest thing I can do. But it's also very effective. So, I think some of the things you mentioned today about mindset and kind of meditation, mobility, things like that, Eastern medicine and things, not a topic that I necessarily talk a lot about on the podcast. So I really appreciate you bringing that to the show here, and kind of opening up some discussions that maybe be a little bit unfamiliar with, a lot of people might be unfamiliar with. And so are there any last kind of comments or anything you want to kind of leave us here before we wrap up?
Yeah, maybe just to touch on one thing you said there towards the end. About it's related to squatting and using an assist for that. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really important for anybody of any age, but especially older folks, is to not just to really be aware of the thoughts in your head about what you think you should be doing, right? So every morning I do assisted squat mobility for my hips, because my hips are super tight in the morning, and I have just some Angles 90 suspension thing that I hold on to. But it could be a countertop, could be a doorknob, it doesn't matter. It's like, the point here though is to really be aware of what your body feels comfortable with, and use whatever props you need to do, use whatever assist you need, because don't think that you're supposed to do it a specifically certain way. Like if you're sitting on the floor, you need to sit up on a cushion or a block or something so that your hips are higher off the floor. Absolutely do that. Don't think like I can't do meditation unless I sit my hips on the floor. That is absolutely not the case, right? So it's like, be open to adjust things that will make it work for you. That's the whole point. It needs to work for you, right? So just be open to like adjusting positions, using help, assist, whatever you want to call it. Like be open to that, because that's going to help you get to the next stage.
Awesome. Yeah. Finding assistance and just kind of progressing, regressing to kind of what fits for you. I think that's really important. Well, Tim, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. I want to make sure that the audience can find you as well if they. I know we had a pretty interesting discussion. Like I said, a couple topics that I don't normally talk about, so I thought that was
Yep.
really cool. Are you on Instagram? Where can people find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at Move Mantra, which is MOVEMANTRA.
Okay.
You can also find me on Facebook just under Tim Griffin. And my website is movemantra.com. So any of those.
Okay. And do you have a Facebook group people can join?
Yeah, there's a Facebook group called the 50 Strong Squad,
Okay.
which you can just search for that, or you can just go to my personal page and it's linked from there.
Okay.
It'd be great to have you. Yep.
Awesome. Yeah. And so I will get that information. I will put that in the show notes as well. And so
Cool.
that people it'll be linked there so people can kind of click to that. But again, thank you so
Sure.
much, Tim, for joining us today. I really appreciated it. And I think we got a lot of value out of today's episode.
Thanks, Anthony. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks, Tim.
Later.
That concludes this episode of the Fatherhood Fitness Podcast. Thank you for those of you who took time out of your busy schedules to listen. If you have any questions or comments or an idea for a topic for a future episode, please feel free to reach out, and I'd love to hear from you.